what are our weather conditions like where we are now? So where I am, finally fall is arriving. I would say today, for the first time, we've had to turn on the heat. And of course, our days are getting shorter. Our hours of daylight are shorter. Now I'd say that probably our sun's rising around, it's starting to get light around 6:30, 7, well, probably about 6:30, and getting dark by about 6:30. So our days are getting shorter. Like I say, that's not altogether a bad thing. It just is what it is. I kind of like the shorter days, coming in, making stews. You know, I love the seasons. I'm kind of romantic like that.
This is kind of down home, Dorian. I like it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, you know, we're a community, and that's something that I think is so important. Is that and Nadia and I were talking about that a little earlier. It's nice to kind of feel like at the end of the day, when you're jumping on a webinar like this, that you're catching up with where are we from, you know, who are we, what are our weather conditions like, what's going on with us. So it's kind of like family touch and base. And good, we also have Falls Church, Virginia. Excellent. And you'll notice here we've got, I'll kind of go to the top, we've got, I'm coming from Washington, D.C. area, Gaithersburg, Maryland. Dr. Lowe is joining us from Boulder, Colorado. Dr. Nadia is from Brasilia, Brazil. Cassie is over in South Dakota. Liz is in Kenai, Alaska. Jonathan is joining us from Miami, Florida. Tanya is in Columbus, Ohio. We've got in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Jill is in Texas right now. And Texas is currently underwater, a lot of rain. I'm sorry to hear that. I lived in Houston, Texas for a couple of years back in my younger days. And I used to say we had 3 seasons, hot, hotter, and monsoon. And boy, do I remember those storms. They were absolutely amazing. So fantastic. Good, we got Mike. Hey, good to see you, Mike. Thanks for coming to join us. Mike is coming from Fredonia, New York. And Puerto Rico. All right, Richard. Always such a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining us tonight. And JJ is joining us from Denver. Fantastic. So we're kind of asking folks if you can put in the chat box, which you'll find if you click down at the bottom, if you're kind of new to Zoom, just click on chat. And then if you let us know your first and last name, because we are taking attendance, and let us know where you are joining us from today. So we've also got Bray, Colorado. We've got Albuquerque, New Mexico, Northwest Ohio. Wow, this is fantastic. Bethesda, Maryland. People from all over the place. And thank you so much for giving us your first and your last names and letting us know where you hail from. We've got San Antonio, Lima, Peru, Phoenix, Arizona. Oh, we are just so pleased to have you joining us this evening. Thank you so much. We're here to have some fun, but also to discuss something that's that's pretty important. Which I think for those of us who are involved with this Mission Mosquito campaign really excites us and also compels us to put forth our greatest effort, because we know that this really is a campaign and a topic that has the potential to greatly improve health of people all over the world. And so it really strengthens our resolve to give it our A game, put forth our best effort, and hopefully compel you to want to join us and want to do the same. So I think we've got a lot of folks here. I think we're probably ready to get started with our webinar number 1 for the Globe Mission Mosquito Student Research Campaign, which is also, as you're going to find out about, is not just a student research campaign, but is also much larger than that. It's really a field measurement campaign that is a citizen science effort as well. And so welcome. As you join us, if you'll continue to put in the chat box your first and last name and where you're joining us from. And if you feel like it, you could also let us know if you've had any previous Globe experience. That's kind of helpful to us. Perhaps let us know what organization you're a part of. That would be wonderful. And if we could have the next slide, please. One of the things that, as we get started with our agenda, I also, maybe we could go back 2 slides. I remember there was a wonderful slide at the very beginning that shows Globe. There we are. Thank you so much. I think this is super, super important. The beauty of what we're doing with this campaign is that we're bringing together the formal Globe community, and with that you'll kind of recognize the Globe educator, where we've got our Globe teachers, our scientists, our students, those of whom are generally involved in formal education. So that's what we think about as being the Globe program. And about 2 years ago, we started in earnest, and it is absolutely mushroomed. It has been phenomenal with our citizen scientist campaign, which is known as Globe Observer. So what we're working on with this campaign is a hybrid. We're bringing together some of the aspects of, and particularly these education webinars are going to be more focused on the K-12 formal education audience. Although please do not feel like if you are a citizen scientist and you're not currently or you're not involved with students per se, do be a part of these webinars, because we hope that you're going to learn a lot from them, and also you'll come away from them with an enhanced understanding. But we'll also be starting another series that are going to focus more with a greater emphasis on our citizen scientist audiences. So we're really going to work hard to make sure that we're meeting the needs of everyone. And we would also ask you, because we're flying this plane as we build it, that you help us as we do this collaboration. As you're listening, some guidance, some feedback, some ideas that you might have on your wish list of things that we could provide for you, please. All right, so here's what we're going to do tonight. Welcome an introduction to the Globe Mission Mosquito campaign. We're going to introduce you to the team. We're going to set the purpose and the need for the scientific research. Then we're going to talk about some potential ways in which you might implement this campaign in K-12 settings. We're going to share some ways in which we plan to and have already begun to involve and engage scientists and public health officials. Then we're going to get a tour of the Globe Mission Mosquito website. And finally, this is where your feedback is going to be absolutely vital. We are going to ask you some questions. What are you hearing that excites you, that you can automatically say, oh, yes, I see ways I can implement this? But also, what are some challenges, some potential barriers that you see? Because those are also extremely important. And perhaps you'll have some questions about, well, how is climate change related to the spread of mosquitoes? So as you listen to the different presentations you're going to have tonight, please write down some questions on a piece of paper, and then when we get to that final part, we would love to get your feedback, because this really is a collaborative effort. So thank you so much. And next slide, please. And alrighty. So this is a campaign, as I was saying, that is connecting citizen scientists of all ages to monitor changes in the frequency, range, and distribution of potential disease vector mosquitoes. In addition to that, we're going to share ways in which you can conduct research to explore how these vary in response to changes in environmental conditions. And as I was saying, this really is helping helping us to fuse together the formal Globe and the Globe Observer programs. Excellent. Next slide, please. And if everyone can make sure that they're muted for right now, just down at the bottom on your left hands of your screen, you'll see a place where you can mute. And then later, we'll certainly ask people to unmute and to be able to jump in. So our campaign co-leads, I am the campaign organizer. I'm Dorian Janney. I'm over at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. I was an educator for 30 years. Happened to start off with preschool special education, and then I finished up teaching high school and middle school and adults as well. So I kind of have that wealth of the educational, I wouldn't say expertise, but certainly lots and lots and lots of amazing opportunities to teach students of all ages over that long tenure of being an educator. And then we have Dr. Roseanne Lowe, affectionately known to us as Rusty, and now your family because you're part of this campaign. So you can call Dr. Lowe Rusty. And she is a phenomenal scientist in her own right. It will tell us a little bit more about herself as we continue. But it's nice to know that we have a scientist educator team whom we're working with. And we also have Cassie Sofing, who was an educator for many, many years, and also has just a great deal of expertise and is an absolutely phenomenal tech support and computer guru. So we are here to serve you. We've got a lot of other folks behind the scenes as well, and we're just super, super excited about bringing this campaign to you. Next slide, please. So here are some of the things that we're hoping you're going to feel empowered to do as a result of being a part of this campaign. We hope that you're going to feel ready to conduct your own research and contribute to the science outcomes for this campaign. And these outcomes include the basic scientific research that refines our understanding of mosquito ecology and behavior. And you'll learn more about, we're going to tease those apart so you'll get a better sense of what exactly we're talking about. You'll also be contributing to the development of an extensive database that can be used by scientists who create and use models to develop early warning systems for potential disease outbreaks. Next slide, please. And now I am going to turn things over to my my comrade, Dr. Rusty Lowe. Take it away.
Thanks, Dorian. I just wanted to put this slide up for those of you who have come late and have not used Zoom before. If you scroll down to the bottom of this picture that you have, you'll see that there's a bunch of different icons. There's an icon there that says chat, and if you hit that, you will see the chat open up on the right-hand side. And you'll see there's a box there shown by the green arrow where you can write whatever you want. Not everything that you want, but we'd love to hear your questions about mosquitoes, about science, about this campaign. We're going to be looking at this later, so don't feel like it has to be, you can write about what you want, when you want. It doesn't have to be synchronous with what we're talking about. And I have questions for you. I'd like to know what you think about science, what you think about citizen science, and how we can excite your students. So let's just, I hope to start seeing those answers in there. And let's get going. Great. So one of the reasons that I got interested in mosquitoes is, you know, as a climate scientist, I found that it's really hard sometimes to convey how serious climate change is, how it is happening, and really if people don't really have a lot of understanding about atmospheric physics, you know, it might be a leap of faith to say, oh yeah, climate is changing, because they don't have the mathematical background. And at one point I said, you know, I would really like to talk about something that people experience in their everyday lives, an impact of climate change. And of course, mosquitoes is my number one of that. So what I wanted to introduce here is the fact that humans and mosquitoes have had a very long history. We have co-evolved essentially and adapted together. And I just wanted to do a shout out for this book. It's called The Fever. And this is a book that is really, really interesting. If you're interested about mosquito history, it's talking about malaria. And what you'll find out if you read this book is that mosquitoes have been instrumental for, really thousands of years. And they actually have served as, I said, unwitting biological weapons, because if there were people that were coming in that didn't have resistance to some of the diseases those local mosquitoes had, they'd be wiped out. So mosquitoes have played a big role in the history of conquest and colonization around the world. And even today, mosquitoes are the number one animal that's posing a threat to more than 1 billion people every year. So this is why this is really, really important. So I thought I would start out this webinar series with a story about mosquitoes, because what you do in science is you are actually crafting a story from the data that you create, and then you have to, of course, talk about it with other people. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to tell you my mosquito story. And so the story of mosquitoes is really a climate story and a human story. And but here we're going to be talking about not the malaria mosquito, which is what Sonia's book is about, but we're going to talk about the mosquito that carries the pathogens that can cause a lot of diseases: dengue, chikungunya, yellow fever, and Zika. And I'm sure you've heard of at least maybe one of these diseases, and they are all diseases that are causing threats around the world. So we're going to be talking here about climate history. And, one of the things that's really, really cool is that if you're studying mosquitoes, it's a very interdisciplinary kind of story. So if we take a look at the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about climate history. And the Aedes aegypti, the Latin name Aegypti means Egypt, and that's where this mosquito was first found. And so I have a picture here that you can see of the African continent, and you probably have some awareness that there was once ice ages and glaciers were moving across the planet, building in the northern hemisphere, building in the southern hemisphere. Climate has always been changing. And when we had ice sheets in the northern and southern hemispheres, we actually had big dry deserts in the equatorial regions. And so this was what Africa was like at the end of the Pleistocene, which is the Ice Ages, the beginning of the Holocene, which is modern times. And what you see in this little inset here, this picture, is what you see, that's where that little red box is. That's that part of Africa. So the first box that you see on the left is what the climate was like from about 12,000 years ago to about 8,000 years ago. And the little red dots are where people were found during that time. Then around 8,500 years ago, climate is beginning to change, and we have a real dramatic reorganization of our system, and there's no more desert there. We have all across what today is the Sahara Desert, we had moist, wet conditions. And with these moist, wet conditions, we have people, and those little red dots are where people were found. Archaeology. This story is about archaeology, it's about entomology, it's about climate, right? All these different things. And you can see that people were found in places today that you can no longer live. And skipping then down to the last panel there, that around 4,500, 4,200 years ago, we began to bring in the modern climate regime. And what happened is this is when the Sahara began to form again. And when that happened, it was really very impactful for mosquitoes, because mosquitoes like, as you probably know, moist and wet conditions. So during the middle of the Holocene, around 8,000 years ago, we had the Aedes aegypti mosquito was found all across Africa in the Sahara zone. Then when it got dry, they're losing their habitat. And so what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, where can I find water? And they were going to the same places that people were, because that's where people found water. And do you know that today there are ancestral mosquitoes south of the Sahara that are much more primitive in their genealogy, and they live in holes in wood. They're called wood hole mosquitoes. That's where they breed. Well, when we began to get a drying up of these natural habitats, these mosquitoes moved into where people were, and they said, wow, this is pretty cool, because people at this time were already making pots. They're storing water for use in their households, and we're providing a perfect environment, a place for those mosquitoes to breed. And at the same place are the source of blood for the mother mosquitoes' blood meal that they need for their eggs. And so what happened was mosquitoes then became part of our ecosystem. And the Aedes aegypti today, which is this mosquito that carries all these arboviruses I just talked about that are so serious, they are well adapted to people. They don't fly a long way. They fly a maximum of 500 meters, but some of them may only fly 10 meters in their lifetime. They stay really close and they stick around people. So I just thought this was a really interesting story, because this is about why people and mosquitoes have this long relationship. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to fill in the rest of the story without going into too much detail or taking too much time. But we have this one mosquito, which is the Aedes from Egypt, the Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito. And we now have that mosquito all over the world, all over the world. And we know from dates of first appearance of dengue or first appearance of yellow fever that we were beginning to see these mosquitoes in the New World around the 1600s. And why do you think that might be? So what was happening around 1400s, 1500s, 1600s? Well, we had explorers and we had conquistadors, and they were going from Spain and from Portugal, and they were going to Africa, and they were, yeah, that's it. Travelers, explorers, and Columbian exchange is perfect. I can't look at the chat or else I get too excited. I want to talk about that. But anyway, so they're going there, they're picking up slaves from Africa, and they're bringing them to the New World, and they're exchanging those slaves for the different kinds of things they want, like gold, and then they're bringing it back to Europe. Well, when they do that, they're also picking up other things they need, provisions for the trip. One of those provisions are big barrels of what? Water that they need to drink, right? And who do you think is hitchhiking in those barrels of water but those mosquitoes that are well adapted to living in human containers? That's the Aedes aegypti. So if you look at this artistic rendition, you can see that we have one of those frigates going across the ocean. You can see the barrels of water that were there. And so that's the story for the one species of mosquito, Aedes aegypti. There is one other mosquito that carries exactly the same diseases. And its origin was actually in Asia. It's called the Asian tiger mosquito. And we didn't have those mosquitoes anywhere in the world except in Asia until about early 1970. And what began happening there was that we began to buy used tires from Northern Asia. And those tires are perfect habitats for the Aedes albopictus mosquito. And now we have Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus all over the world. And we as humans are responsible for those changes. So the last thing that I have in this picture, which was done by a great scientist and artist friend of mine, and it's not quite finished yet because you see that there's a plane there, but that plane also represents the last way in which vectors are getting around, and this is very important. And this is actually one of the reasons we started the Globe Mission Mosquito program, and that is the disease Zika. You know, you probably have been reading, there's a brand new outbreak that just was located in India. 3 years ago, there was a big one in Brazil, and we can expect to have Zika outbreaks from now until the time that we're able to control it. But one of the ways that the Zika virus is being spread is that it can be carried by people. Once they're bit by a mosquito, they get the virus, they can travel with the virus, and this is the first mosquito-borne disease that can be transmitted by fluids. So that would be, saliva, sexual activity, these kinds of things. So it's the first communicable mosquito disease. This is a game changer for us in terms of understanding and trying to control mosquito outbreaks. And so that is one of the reasons why I wanted to tell the Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus story. These are the only 2 mosquitoes that carry the Zika virus, as well as dengue, yellow fever, and chikungunya, and a bunch of other arboviruses. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, we can just now move on to the big question that you might have, and why is NASA interested in your mosquito observations? Because what does NASA study, right? What does NASA do? Where do they go? You know, if you look at the next slide, we can, you know the answer. I don't have to show you. You know, NASA is interested in space, but most people don't realize that NASA also studies Earth from space, and that is quite a lot of what they do. And so, one of the things that we need in order to control mosquito diseases is to have lots of surveillance and lots of eliminating habitats. And there just aren't enough people on the planet to do that. And so, thank you very much. Just a minute here. Let me get rid of that. Oh my gosh, I can't turn it off. Okay. That's really bad. Sorry about that. I had a timer, so I knew that I had to switch to here right now. Okay. That's embarrassing. Okay, but anyway, what I wanted to say was, that these Earth observations are really important for us, because since we don't have enough people to say, mosquitoes are here, I'm going to get rid of them, mosquitoes are here, I'm going to get rid of them, mosquitoes are here, I'm going to tell the public authorities, and they're going to get rid of them. We have a lot of people that do make predictive models of where we might have outbreaks. They use the data that they have, that we know about the different kinds of Earth system conditions that mosquitoes love. So let's go to the next slide. And this is what they use. Basically they can use Earth observation data to say, oh, precipitation, temperature, land cover conditions are just right for an outbreak. We talked about El Nino. Very often El Nino may carry in certain parts of the world an enhanced opportunity for mosquito population explosion. So that's one kind of mosquito data. We can call that actually proxy mosquito data, because we're not seeing mosquitoes from space, right? So, but the mosquito data that you can collect can be used to verify what's being modeled using these indirect measurements from space. So there's your mosquito data that you're going to be looking at right there. There's a mosquito larva. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so I want to finish this up really quickly, but I just wanted to say that we want you to know that citizen scientists are not just crowdsourcing data for use by NASA scientists, by these Earth observations. In fact, citizen scientists are expected, and we want to have them contributing through the whole process of science, developing their own questions, identifying problems in their own community, asking the right questions, working with other scientists to come up with the right kind of analyses that will allow them to solve the problems that they have. And so that's what we're really trying to promote with Globe Mission Mosquito. And today it's all about big data. We've got these huge supercomputers. NASA's got them, UCAR's got them. We have them all over the place. Those big computers can handle lots and lots of data. So the idea of one scientist going out in the field, collecting mosquito data, is a thing of the past. We can get thousands and thousands of people collecting data, and we can actually analyze it, because now we have the computational capacity. And you can see here, I just grabbed this really quickly, but citizen scientists are also helping to publish papers, so that when you contribute data, your data is highly valued. And if you're an integral part of the project, citizen scientists can expect to be recognized for some of their work. So I just wanted to give you those different pieces of information as we move forward. I think I have one or two more. So that's where Globe and Globe Observer comes in. You probably know that Globe is a network of citizens around the world that are collaborating, and they're monitoring, they're reporting, they're analyzing, they're understanding changes in the world around them. And they are also looking at problems at home and global. And the reason why all the data collected by Globe people is because we all do it the same way. That makes reproducible science. And if you're a Globe, if you know Globe, you know that we talk about Globe data being collected using protocols. Everybody does it the same way. We validate our data the same way. And so for the Globe Mission Mosquito Project, we're using this new tool, the Globe Mosquito Habitat Mapper. And the Habitat Mapper is our protocol. So if you follow the steps in there, you're going to be doing it exactly right. Last one, please. So I'm going to leave you with this picture here. This actually is Globe mosquito habitat data that I pulled out yesterday using the Globe database. And you can see that there's different questions, that there are different kinds of categories of data that are being collected. And I'd like you to think about what kind of questions can be answered using these different classes of data. All right, next one. So here's a summary of what we talked about. Most importantly, though, is that citizen scientists don't just collect data. We want you to have a role in every step of the process, and we are here to support you in that effort. Okay, next one.
All right, well, thank you so much for setting the stage for us, Rusty. And I do hope, as you've been, listening to some of the things that Rusty was telling us, and I certainly have seen so much excitement in the chat box, we're looking at this not just from, say, a biological perspective or perhaps even the collection of environmental data, but, we're going all the way to NASA satellites, and we're going all the way to looking at what are some of the ways in which indigenous peoples have understood and wondered about mosquitoes and mosquito-transmitted diseases. We're thinking about literature. We're just, we're kind of consider this as though we were silly putty, which was something when I was young, and I know I'm dating myself here, but silly putty was something that we got, and you'd kind of take it and you'd squish it on top of the Sunday comics, and then when you picked it up, you had the picture of the Sunday comics, and you could stretch it and put it into all different types of shapes. And that's really what we want you to come away understanding, that we are proposing that we do with this campaign. So in this slide, I've written that it's really easy to be involved. There are a continuum of opportunities. I've heard from some people that are a little concerned, some educators, because they say, where we live, mosquito season, thank goodness, the active mosquito season is just ending. So how are we going to be involved during the school year? So I'm going to be explaining some of the ways in which you can be involved, whether you have active mosquitoes or whether you are happily experiencing an inactive mosquito cycle. So next slide, please. It's a 3-year campaign, and we really, really do want your input and ideas. We would love to see and be totally supportive of as many science fair type projects as possible from this effort. We are going to be looking at and assisting people with following the Globe Virtual Science Symposium, and also making sure that for those of you who are educators and may have your students creating projects that are perhaps not just or maybe not even in the Globe Science Fair, but you're doing it for your school, or maybe you're taking them all the way to the Intel Science Fair level. We're going to be here to support you with both educational resources as well as having scientists who are there to listen to the work that you and your students are doing and support you in your experimental design. The other thing that I find particularly compelling about this effort is that there are so many opportunities for you and your students to lead a school-based community action effort, so that you're able to teach students and teachers and the larger community about the threat of mosquitoes, but much more importantly, the preventions that they can take to reduce these threats. We really want to ensure that our students aren't, and that not just our students, but all of our citizen scientists of all ages aren't kind of walking away being concerned that, oh no, these are all these diseases that are transmitted by mosquitoes, and then every time they get bitten, worrying that perhaps they could have contracted one of those diseases. The good news is, and you're going to learn more about this as we share more information about mosquito-transmitted diseases, but the good news is that it is actually not as easy to transmit these diseases as one might think, for a variety of fascinating reasons. And if people are to take preventative measures, and we'll be teaching about those different preventative measures, but also hoping that you'll do the research on the preventative measures in your own communities, then I really think that teachers, students, citizen scientists, all of us will walk away from this really feeling not scared, but feeling very empowered by, wow, here's something where we really can make a difference. Next slide, please. We're going to be covering a continuum of ways in which you could integrate this into your classroom, from something like I was just saying, where you're perhaps looking at, well, why are mosquitoes considered the world's most dangerous animal? That's just kind of crazy. And then to what's super important, how can we protect ourselves? And how can we reduce the number of potential mosquito breeding habitats? Next slide, please. So there are, with the Mosquito Habitat Mapper app, which, as Rusty told us, is the protocol for mosquitoes for the GLOBE program, there's 4 steps. And what's super important to remember is that it is great and wonderfully helpful if you're able to do all 4 steps, but your data is very, very useful, and you are doing your job if you only do one of those steps. So the 4 steps are, first, you look around and you see if you can identify and take pictures of places where mosquitoes could lay their eggs. The next step is, let's say you look and you see, that, and here's a personal example on my part from my yard. My children leave buckets of water out for their dogs. And every now and then they forget to replace that water. And I might look in that bucket of water and see that there's some little wiggly things in there. So in that case, we have potentially some live mosquito larvae. So what I could do then is sample and count them. I could scoop some out, and we'll be explaining to you how to do this. And then I could count how many larvae do I have. The good thing about the larvae is that they cannot hurt you. Now, certainly, you're going to want to take your preventative precautions, because if there's larvae, there certainly could be adults somewhere, in the vicinity. But the good news about these larvae is they cannot hurt you. So let's say you find some larvae, and I'm going to divulge a little bit about myself here and tell you that I'm often super excited when I find larvae. So I'm sure you'll probably be thinking, wow, that's just crazy. What woman is super excited when she finds mosquito larvae? But I am excited about it because when you get a magnifier, and we're going to tell you about how you can get these very inexpensive magnifiers that go on your cell phone, and you take a look at the larvae, they are absolutely crazy fascinating. So that's the 3rd step. You can photograph and identify the species of larvae, and we'll be going into detail to show you how to do that. And then the 4th step, when you are able to, you eliminate the breeding site. And thus there are fewer places for the mosquitoes to be laying their eggs, and potentially fewer mosquitoes to be bugging you. So those are the 4 steps. And again, you don't have to do all of them. So during non-active mosquito season, you, your students, anybody can be walking around various places and simply identifying, taking pictures of places where mosquitoes could be breeding. And then if you're able to, dumping that water out so that that doesn't become a potential breeding site when mosquitoes are active. The next slide, please. So during the non-active mosquito season, which many folks are in, you and your students can be learning about the types of diseases that mosquitoes can transmit and that are actually being reported in your area. This is one of the things I have started doing, and I was rather surprised and a little bit shocked to find that there are many, many types of mosquito-transmitted diseases, and the number and the types of diseases are changing and have changed in the past couple of years. And that data was easily available for me to find for the county which I live in, right outside Washington, D.C., by going online. So we'll be sharing some of the ways in which you're able to do that, and also asking you some of the ways in which you and your students have been able to learn about the types of diseases that are being reported in your region. And one more quick. Another thing you can do is find out, which diseases have been reported in your location. And next click. Find out when active mosquito season usually starts. So I did some research and I found out in my area, it usually starts in April. Next click. And then find out the temperatures that mosquitoes in your location generally prefer to be active. As you learn more about this, you're going to find out that there's several species of mosquito that are in your location, and that some of those species actually have different conditions for which they're active. So you're going to learn, you and your students are going to be learning more about mosquitoes than you ever imagined anybody knew, which is also pretty fascinating in and of itself. Next click. Then you can predict when the next active mosquito season will be, and here's where we're looking at adding some more globe protocols. You could be collecting air temperature. You could collect precipitation data, using those data to create your own model to try to predict when you believe the next active mosquito season is going to happen. So your students, you can be doing that, and then even though that will be after the science fair, most likely, depending on where you live, of course, then you can use that information, and that can be part of the information that the students would be using for their science fair the following year. Because, of course, with all good science, we don't end up solving everything when we finish one investigative study. Usually what happens is we finish it, we learn something, and then we find out that there's a whole bunch more questions that we have. So we are anticipating that that's what you and your students are going to find as well. And next click. And so, and then you can also look at the previous temperature and precipitation records to see if they've been changing over the past, say, 10 years. These are also just ideas. This is some brainstorming that we have done. We are creating this plane as we fly it. So we're hoping that as you look at some of these potential investigative questions that you can be exploring during non-active mosquito season, you will come up with some other ideas, and I hope you'll put them in the chat window, because those will be useful for all of us to have as well. Next slide, please. Okay, here's some other things you can do. Some of you have been noting in the chat window that, hey, we have mosquitoes all year long, or, now our mosquito season is just starting up. So we would like you to be collaborating with other schools. It would be really neat to find out which schools have active mosquitoes. We have a discussion section that Cassie is going to be showing you in a little bit. There's going to be places where you can share in, what you're observing, and perhaps you might even reach out to folks in another school and find out what temperature, precipitation, vegetation, and other environmental factors are in place for them to be having active mosquitoes. And next click, have them share their sample counts and their larval identification data. Have them share the types of mosquito-transmitted diseases that have been reported in these different locations, and even how they impact the people that are in their region. And share information about the impact of extreme weather events. I see we have a lot of folks from Texas, and I'm sure especially those in the Houston area, can respond to this, very easily after, the horrible hurricane that had come through, last year. You can talk about, how did that impact the types of mosquitoes, perhaps even the density of mosquitoes. I know I read recently a study that said in North Carolina after Florence, they started to have some really large mosquitoes, which hadn't been seen in that region before. So just fascinating to share information about the impact of these extreme weather events, also changing weather patterns, and the impact of human-driven changes, deforestation, dam construction, etc., on the mosquito population. And I think what you're going to find as you look at all of the information that you can be sharing and collecting that are related to mosquitoes, that being involved in the Trees Around the Globe program that Brian Campbell is leading, Brian Campbell and Peter Nelson, and also the the urban heat campaign that is going on, also the land cover globe observer tool. All of those are going to be able to give you some data, which is going to be very, very useful in better understanding this larger picture. And next slide, please. So that's what I have over here. I wanted to make sure that I included that. There is a Globe Zika education and prevention effort that is taking place. It's also a very fantastic and very intensive 3-year program that is taking place with a particular focus and emphasis in certain locations. We would love to hear from people who are involved with that program and have them be our presenters sometimes. Trees Around the Globe campaign and the Globe Observer Land Cover app, all of those are really, really important data to be weaving in as we try to get an understanding of this larger picture. Next slide, please. And as I was saying earlier, plan a school-based community action plan. This could be something that goes toward your student service learning hours, and it also just a great way to involve your students in helping to inform their larger community. They could share pictures of the potential habitats they located around the school throughout the school year, make posters, presentations, videos, etc., to share why mosquitoes can be dangerous and how to prevent them from biting. And next slide. Again, the schools with active mosquitoes can be sharing their best practices for sampling and identifying mosquito larvae. We'd love to have you present during our webinars. You could write a blog sharing your data and whether you have people in your location who have contracted mosquito-transmitted diseases, in addition to some of the preventative measures that are being taken in your location. Next slide, please. So we really want to hear from you possible investigation ideas, how we can support you and your students, potential challenges or barriers you foresee, how our team of scientists can assist you, and then ideas you have for these school-based community action efforts. Next slide, please. All righty, and I'm going to hand it back over to Rusty.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up here, getting back to the idea of, you know, we are really interested in supporting you and answering the kinds of questions that are of interest to you and are useful for you and your community. And so I asked in the earlier part of this session, what kind of questions can be answered using Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper data? Well, if we look on the next slide, one of the questions is, you know, you can look at, by looking at the timing, what kind of rate are invasive species moving to the new regions? Next slide. We can also look at the mosquito breeding sites and say, what effect does human behavior have on eliminating mosquito-borne disease? The next slide. Is there a risk for West Nile virus or another mosquito disease in my community? You can do that by identifying those particular taxa that are disease carriers in your region. Next one. How can we predict mosquito population explosions and reduce the risks of these outbreaks? And that's something we can get by monitoring our mosquito habitats. And then, of course, there's other data that we can also bring in. For instance, how is climate change affecting the range and distribution of different kinds of mosquitoes? So earlier in this presentation, I talked about how the whole mosquito story is connected to humans and to climate. We can continue talking about that story as you go through your research. Also, we can look at the importance of changes in the landscape. We know that one of the big predictors of where we find new populations of mosquitoes is where there has been recent landscape change. And so by connecting the mosquito observations you might make using the Mosquito Habitat Mapper app with land cover observations, we can get a really rich idea, and we can really come up with some very interesting kinds of questions and answers about that particular relationship between biology and mosquito biology. And then, of course, the hydrosphere, which is where those mosquitoes reside. What kind of water quality is necessary for these mosquitoes to grow and thrive and eventually emerge as adults. Because if they can't do that, we're not going to have live mosquitoes. So all those things together are playing an important role. And these are just a few questions just on the top of my head, but you can probably think of many, many more. But I just wanted to show you that we have that data right in this database right now, and you can begin to explore some of these questions. And as we get more and more data collected by citizen scientists, there'll be more questions that you can answer. Okay, next one, please.
Hi, I'm Cassie Sofing, one of the team members for the Globe Mission Mosquito, and I wanted to just go through the website with you to make sure that everybody can log in and can find us. If you're a teacher, under Getting Started, you can create an account if you don't have one already. And if you're a citizen scientist, there's a place also where you can create an account. And that would be the first step, because when you log in, then you can go to our page, and then you'll be able to type questions to the scientists or to contribute, but you have to be registered and logged in first to do that. So to get to the Mission Mosquito page, you go under Do Globe by Earth Sphere and Hydrosphere. There we are. And so underneath the two Hydrosphere projects, we have Mission Mosquito right here, and click on it. And it takes you to our landing page. And so we have a little bit about our project, what our science questions are, and what our goals are. And on the left hand, that's your navigation page and how to participate. Step one, you've already done it, you're here. So we appreciate that. Different places that you can go to participate besides our webinars. We have a discussion page you can share with others in the community, as Rusty and Dorian mentioned. But if you have a question and you want an answer pretty quick, click on Ask a Scientist, and we'll go through that just so you know where it is. If you don't have your account, you can come here and check and find out how to make an account. And we have an optional Google form. If you'd like to know about our upcoming webinars, we can send you a notification about the topic and the login and how to get there. That's the Google form. And as we mentioned, everybody can participate because we're a worldwide collaborative. We have a little bit of information about mosquitoes. We called it Mosquitoes 101. So if you'd like to know the life cycle, body parts, things that you're looking for when you use the app, things that will make you stronger at identification. And then Rusty and Dorian both mentioned the protocols for the Globe Mission Mosquito. Air temperature, precipitation, relative humidity, in atmosphere, hydrosphere, all the protocols, and in the pedosphere, soil moisture, soil temperature, and biosphere, it's land cover and green up and green down. You can take individual e-trainings to learn more about them, to kind of strengthen your investigative skills, give you a little bit better background. Webinars, if you want to know in advance and to sign up, you can come here, register for the webinar. If you click here, webinar details, if you can't make it, that's not going to be a problem. Click on the calendar and you'll see at least one webinar a month. And this is where we'll archive the webinars so you can play them back. And we'll also link to the PowerPoint and whatever other resources that we are sharing. We know that if you're doing a science fair project, finding the data would be important. And so we've given you some quick links to get to that. And in addition, we have some visualization tools that one of our webinars will go through is NASA Worldview, how you can add in near real-time data. Under resources, we have two sets of resources. One would be educator resources and the other is research resources. In general, we want to draw your attention to the Globe International Virtual Science Symposium. If you're an educator and you have kids that are looking for a really great challenge, this would be it. Kids, if you're looking for a science fair, again, this would be the place to start. If you have general mosquito questions. You can click here. It will take you quickly to the Ask a Scientist. And we're putting together a book list on mosquitoes. If you're an elementary teacher and there's some folklore books on mosquitoes, there's some great middle school books, and then the book list that Rusty talked about is also there. Educator resources, we have an awful lot of materials to support you. We have Know Your Mosquito, the Habitat Mapper taxa. We've got introduction to using it, how to use the app for the first time, all kinds of things that you can use in your classroom. We have recommended globe protocols. There's educator guides, so you, as a teacher, you can look at them ahead of time before you would incorporate them. And I know Rusty probably wants to jump in and talk about the Smithsonian Learning Lab curriculum mosquito because she had a part in it. I'll pause here, Rusty.
Okay, we have a link right here to this curriculum. What's really exciting if you are a Globe teacher is that you know that Globe does not create curricula. We don't do this because every school, every district, every organization, every country may have different curriculum that they have to follow. But the Smithsonian Institution, because of the severe nature of mosquito-borne disease and the threat that it has for humans, they put together I would say, astounding and outstanding curriculum. It's currently available in English and Spanish. It's going to be available in a total of 30 languages beginning in the beginning of 2019. So this will provide lots of opportunities to connect maybe the kinds of things that you're doing in conjunction with the Globe Mosquito Mission with things that you can do in your classroom. And I was really excited to partner with Smithsonian on this because it is Unit 5 has actually activities where students are actually using the Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper to collect data and understand a little bit more about place-based science and what's happening with local mosquitoes. So I hope you'll check it out.
Thank you. We have activities under student activities and science fair support, how to make your own mosquito larvae trap. I'd like to point out the Educator Toolkit, Framing Phenomena-Based Student Investigations, as a place to look for phenomena and the type of NASA data that's available to meet next gen. And again, another quick link to NASA Worldview. And an awesome resource also is the Quick Start Guide to Finding Data and Imagery for Student Investigations. If you're looking for an after-school idea or just kind of a fun activity in general, we have the Zika Zap Bingo game that works with icons for habitat and then just kind of learning what those are and where you could possibly find water sources. We have teacher guides. We have guides to using science notebooks in the classroom, teacher versions of most everything. Here is also, if you're looking for research resources, again, we're looking for the International Virtual Science Symposium, and then looking at the globe identification, mosquito body parts, and keep coming back because we have a lot of information to populate. Probably the most exciting part is going to be this Ask a Scientist blog. So you can do two things here. We have a welcome message by Rusty, and you can read it, and she's invited you to answer a couple of questions, and she's going to definitely address those questions in future blogs. But if you have a question and you're not sure if you want to write it or who to ask, all we ask is that you put your name, email address, and your question, and I want to say we're pretty well connected, so we can help you find answers to most of your questions.
Yeah, and I think you can have an expectation that we will get back to you within a couple days, Monday through Friday, and you can have the expectation that we probably won't be answering questions on the weekend. So I always tell people that because, you know, sometimes you have a question, you have a burning desire to know the answer, but I don't always check the web on the weekends. So let's make sure that we get those informations up there as soon as we can.
Thank you. And if you're like me, you probably already have some questions and you're just not sure exactly if you want to put them in an email or not, but we have a lot of, right here we have an FAQ on safety. How do you keep your kids safe when you go out to check for is it okay to go out and do that? If you have a question about the science of it, where would you collect data? Can I use NASA images? Better understand mosquitoes? We have lots of questions that are kind of pre-populated here. Take a look at those, and even if they're there and you want to find out more, let us know. We have technology. If your app or something isn't working right, or you're not sure if you need to reset your password, this is a place that you can come looking for information too. And as far as community, we are a community and want to make sure that we can connect with each other. So how do you share your data? How do you connect with others? And then a place to share photos and events is coming down the line with that too. And if you noticed, I'm just clicking back up here at the top, and that's my way back. We have a discussion forum, and once you're registered, please click on Join Community. Mine says Leave Community because I'm already a member, but this way we'll find out where everybody is from, and your profile, once you create one, will show up here, and your location will show up from wherever you're at in the world. So I'm excited about this part. And the last part, data challenges. We're interested in kind of encouraging, well, obviously encouraging you to collect data. We'd like to know, big picture, kind of coming down the road, where is the first sighting of mosquitoes in North America? And so we'll issue kind of data blitzes, and we'll probably do them by region or by state. If you're an informal educator and you want to know if you're, competition with other informal educators to see how many, data collections you can get in a certain period. Again, we're interested in the data, so we got lots of opportunities to get you out there and checking. If you have any questions on the website, just let me know. I'm happy to help you out.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. I see that we are already at the bewitching hour. So what I was writing in the chat window that I'm going to do is I am going to make a thread. And Cassie, if you'll go ahead and click for these 4 questions, I'm going to make a thread for, actually there might be 5, for each of these different questions. And then on our discussion section of the Mission Mosquito website. And so that will be a good impetus to get you over there, to have you join the team as as Cassie was showing you how you can do, and then to have you give us some answers and some of your feedback to these different questions, because truly we value and we need your input, your feedback, your guidance in order to make everything work. So we are just super excited to be starting things off, to have you be a part of our kickoff campaign. And we're hoping that you'll be able to join us on Thursday, November 8th, when we're going to be looking at, and next slide, please. We're going to be looking at how and why NASA satellites are studying, are doing some research on mosquito-transmitted diseases, and we will also be hearing from some a scientist who will be sharing with us how he or she conducts their research using some of the NASA satellite data, in addition to talking about some of the ways in which you might go about with your students generating your investigative design. Then we're going to take off December because we know how crazy that can be. Doesn't mean we're taking it off as far as though keeping up with things on our website. We'll be continuing to have our rich collaboration and discussion, our Ask Our Scientists. Hopefully you'll have gotten started with your investigations and be ready to have some questions and share some data. And then you'll see we'll be looking in January and February. We're going to be really focused on those research investigations and helping you and your students to be prepared for your IVSS or your different types of science fair projects that you might be working on. Then in March, we're going to, get ready, get set for active mosquito season and talk about those community school action campaigns that you might be having. Then we're going to be focused in April on how do we identify these mosquito larvae. May, we'll be looking at how you might be, again, helping your entire community prepare for the active mosquito season. And we're not going to take off in the summer. Summer, we're going to talk about how you can continue to use the mosquito habitat napper, perhaps with summer camp groups. And of course, for those of you who are in year-round schools and who are from other countries where you're not taking off July and August, we're going to be talking about ways in which you're going to be continuing to work with K-12 students with your mosquito habitat mapper. So again, it's a huge continuum and lots of ways in which people can be involved. And in July, we'll be looking at stories from the field. And as I said, we will be also starting up with our citizen science-based, kind of our science public health focused webinars in January. And then we will be having bi-weekly webinars. So thank you to everyone for joining us. If you didn't get a chance in the chat window to just let us know your first and last name and where you're coming from, we would appreciate it. When I wasn't presenting, I took a lot of notes and wrote down the places where people said they were from, and we'll certainly be looking back over the chat to get a sense of this rich conversation that everyone shared with us. So thanks for jumping in and joining. We're sorry this one was so dense, but we had a lot of stuff we wanted to get out there, and we are just super excited about hanging out with you and continuing to learn more about mosquitoes, mosquito-transmitted diseases, when you might anticipate or when you are actually having active mosquitoes in your region, and having you contribute to our data sets. So thank you. We'll leave the chat window open for a couple more minutes here for people to add information. And gosh, what a great group. Look at us from all over the world. This is just fantastic. Thank you so much for making us a part of your evening.